I want to quickly introduce Vicki Cansler, our guest today, because she is such an authentic, transparent, warm guest. And I just can't wait to get into our chat so that you all get to see what I've been able to see in our conversations. Vicki Cansler joined Piedmont Healthcare as the Chief Human Resources Officer in February 2013 and leads all things human resources system-wide all over the system of Piedmont. And she came to the role with extensive HR leadership experience in healthcare and a variety of different functions, but in healthcare. Since joining Piedmont, she has played a role in its astonishing growth. And we hear news almost on a monthly basis about how that growth is continuing. But when she got there, she took it from a $1.4 billion system with 8,500 employees to a more than $4 billion system with 23,000 team members. And again, as I've already mentioned, the growth continues with the recent announcements of some of the acquisitions that have been taking place. Of course, culture plays an important role in Piedmont's growth. So we're going to talk more about culture and how important that has been to Piedmont's success. And I characterize this growth as highly successful because in 2019, Piedmont Healthcare was named one of Georgia's best employers by Forbes and was the top healthcare system on the list. So, and I believe this honor is likely due to Vicki's leadership in reducing employee turnover, improving employee engagement, expanding diversity and inclusion strategies, and establishing and growing the Piedmont Leadership Academy with a real focus on leadership. So for all these reasons and more, she was honored last year as the Chief HR Officer of the Year by the Atlanta Business Chronicle and SHRM Atlanta. Prior to joining Piedmont, Vicki served as Senior Vice President of Human Resources for Health Markets. That was based in Texas, and also as Chief People Officer for Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee. Our guest also held senior global human resources and consulting positions with Booz Allen and Hamilton in Virginia and Deloitte & Touche based out of Dallas. Vicki hails from West Monroe, Louisiana, where she held several roles with Cigna, and that's on the payer side of healthcare. And she earned an MBA from the University of Dallas, a bachelor's degree from the University of Louisiana, Monroe, although she attended another university prior to that. So a couple of undergraduate universities, as well as a graduate program. So she joins us from the mountains outside of Chattanooga, Tennessee, where she and her husband lived part of the time. And they have 2 adult children, Camellia and Clayton, and a 6.5-year-old granddaughter, Athena. So Vicki, life sounds mighty good. So
awaiting a long weekend.
Yay. So I want to start with some lightning round questions, just so our participants, our listeners, can get to know you just a little bit. So you ready?
Yep.
All right. Introvert or extrovert?
Extrovert.
And this may be a silly question. Mountains or the sea?
Mountains. Yes.
That makes sense. Last book you read?
The Little Fires Everywhere.
The Little Fires Everywhere?
Little Fires Everywhere. And it became, I haven't seen the Netflix, but it's an excellent book.
Favorite word?
Go-go. That's my grandmother name.
Oh. Least favorite word?
Can't.
And your superpower?
My maternal grandparents.
Oh. I can't help but mention that Susan Hitchcock, who we all know as the mother of women in leadership, is doing a project on grandparents, grandmothers, I should say. She calls it her She Rose Project. So
yep.
it's that's going to be an interesting project. So just because you mentioned grandmothers, I had to
Yeah.
mention that. I think that's a super idea. All right, so Vicki, you grew up in the Deep South,
Mhm,
and your accent is somewhat obvious.
mhm.
You were attending universities there. Your career has been there. So how do you think growing up in the South has influenced who you are today?
Well, I attribute a lot of, the basic values to really, how I was brought up, and particularly to my superpowers, my grandparents. Excuse me. Think it's mountain air this morning. um, with my grandmother, I mean, she was the steel magnolia. And, I was blessed to have her in my life until she was almost 97 years old. And, she was the type of grandmother that, you don't wear white shoes before Easter, and certainly not after Labor Day, was us about how you set the table. And if she was at my house and I had something wrong when I was an adult, I would certainly know that very, very soon. But little tiny person, tough as nails. And then my grandfather, he gave me the values of business. He was a self-made person, self-employed in the small town of West Monroe. And he gave me the drive, and always whispered in my ear, you can do anything you want to.
Mm,
Don't just let them call you a girl. So
yeah, yeah. And so I asked that question because I think, and we're going to get into this in a minute, how important culture is to any organization, um, and how it attracts a certain kind of individual. Um, but I just wonder if that first notion around culture would come from being from such a strong culture, geographically.
I think it probably was. And of course, I grew up in the Deep South in the 60s. And I mean, you can only imagine. I mean, there's so many notorious perceptions of what it was like growing up in the South in the 60s. But, another thing I was taught is to respect everyone. And it does not matter, how old they are, what sex they are, what race they are, but to respect everyone. And I really saw my grandfather live that in his business.
Mhm,
Even way back then.
mhm,
And he practiced it. He
mhm.
practiced it. So I think that was a foundation at the time. I didn't know I was going to grow up and have a passion for diversity and inclusion and just overall human resources. But I think as I look back on some of the early lessons, that's what was part of the foundation.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's what we call character shaping. Uh,
Yep.
right, right. Okay. Well, and of course, your career journey has almost entirely been within healthcare, although in a variety of different functions, um, for profit, not for profit.
Yeah.
What brought you into healthcare?
You know, it was actually a fluke. I'll be honest with you. Um, I we had moved back to Louisiana for a while before we went back to Texas for 25 years. But I got the job of being a nurse recruiter, which was the very first nursing shortage in the early 80s
Mm,
at Glenwood Regional Medical Center in West Monroe, Louisiana. And what was so special about that, although my grandfather was deceased at that time, he was on the first board at that hospital. And so there was an affinity there and a real love, for the place. But as I got into it, well, first off, I knew the first day that I was asked to be the HR leader, which was about 3 months after I arrived at Glenwood, moving from nurse recruiter to the HR leader. And I didn't know how to spell HR, I knew that first day that was going to be my life's work. And ever since that day in January of 82, so it'll be it's almost 40 years in HR, I knew, and it is my passion. I have in my career seen many sides of healthcare or healthcare related industries, and had the privilege, as you alluded to, of working in public companies, working in partnerships, working in private companies, working in a private equity owned company to go in and do a turnaround. And then of course, working in not-for-profits. Each has their own cultures depending on the focus, as you can well imagine. And I call it a privilege because it has been. It's given me the opportunity to really expand my knowledge and certainly my purview of what work is like in different environments.
Yeah. So you have been through a variety of different functions, both on the pay side and the payer side and so on. So how did you move into this senior HR role? Was that also a fluke?
No. At Cigna, I was at Cigna for 11 years and was an HR leader based in Dallas, and that role continued to grow. While I left Cigna to move on, then after 11 years, that's really where I got a lot of the foundation and certainly the development, because I left at the VP level. I knew, and my mentor, who is still my mentor after 35 years, he said, it's time for you to, even if it's a small company, to really seek out your own shop. He said, you're ready for that. You've got the broad skills in HR that you can run all of those areas. I did a turnaround at an insurance company in New Orleans. And then very, very quickly after that, I was really kind of pirated to go do some consulting, which was a long, hard decision for me. That was mid-career. And I said, ooh, I'm not running my own shop, but it'll give me the opportunity to see to work with multiple clients, to see inside multiple organizations. So my 8 years between Deloitte and Booz Allen, it was, working inside various organizations. And at Booz, it was mostly internal HR, but it was global, and got that perspective. After that, there was an evolution to the CHRO roles, on the payer and provider side. And then Piedmont 8 years ago, which I will tell you, that's the best decision I have ever made in my career.
Wow, that's great to hear. And, you and I came up in a time and an age when you stayed with one company, but it doesn't sound like you did that. You are actually on the forefront of what this generation will experience, which is multiple companies, multiple roles, perhaps even multiple careers. So that's interesting. So that's really given you a well-rounded perspective, both in the industry, across the industry, as well as around HR and leading
Yes.
our
Yeah.
organizations.
And I'm an opportunist. You know, as I was growing in my career, you know, and opportunities, I mean, certainly there was thoughtful decision making, but they presented themselves and it seemed like the right thing first for my family. But you know, then for the progression of my career, yeah, I said, you know, I'm not in this, like you said, the age of when we grew up to get a gold watch, you know, after 25 or 30 years.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, that's really changed. So how would you describe your proudest accomplishment as you look back on your career?
I think there's several things. I think one I'll highlight earlier in my career, it was the successful transition to consulting mid-career. You know, I wasn't straight out of MBA school going to a consulting company. And at the time, because I went to Deloitte first, they had not hired HR leaders to any great degree. And it was still kind of, okay, well, what area can you specialize in? Is it comp? Is it Ben? Is it? But you know, I paved the way by working a lot with, instead of just working in the silo practices within the HR practice, I networked and reached out to the healthcare practices. Because when they were on site, say doing a transformation of a healthcare company, obviously there were people issues. So, you know, part of my work would be doing various types of strategies. It could be anything from a broad HR strategy to a talent management. Actually, a couple of healthcare systems I work with, a nurse recruitment strategy. And then also I did a lot of the strategic work when there were ERP transformations, you know, like moving from an old system to, say, a PeopleSoft or a Lawson or one of those systems.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, I was just going to say, and during that time, my love for healthcare even increased, because during the time at Deloitte, 99% of my clients, I had one client that was non-healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So out of all, and those are amazing. I mean, you've been a turnaround expert. You've been certainly an HR expert and consultant. What brought you the greatest joy?
Well, joy and achievement, because I wanted to kind of fast forward. I think it's joy and achievement.
I do too.
I've been able to see more recently with the work at Piedmont. Like you said, we were a 1.2, 1.4 billion company, 8,500 employees when I arrived. Now we're at 4.5 with 23,000, soon to be around 27,000.
Wow.
Then I know most of you saw the announcement a couple of weeks ago on the intent for a university in Augusta to become affiliated with Piedmont. So you know, I've watched with pride and joy as that has progressed. Another thing I'll say is just watching, and I'm sure many of you, whatever leadership role you're in and whatever discipline you're in, really saw people step up to the plate, a few or not, during the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And you know, we were all operating out of our comfort zone. I mean, take HR, for example. Who would have known a year and a half ago that we would be setting up vaccination clinics for our employees, or opportunities for our employees, and you know, taking stances, you know, on that. So, you know, I was very proud, of course, of my team, but I saw it across all disciplines, from the frontline workers, the essential workers that take care of our patients every day, to, you know, to our leadership. I mean, you know, some days you had to make decisions because things were changing, you know, hourly. And so you were flying by the seat of your pants with the information you didn't have.
Mm-hmm.
I think that has been a proud accomplishment and proud moment, but it also brings me joy.
Well, it's such a well-themed topic for today's discussion, which was building great teams, leading large transitions, and building a pandemic all in a day's work. So how could you not be proud of what you've been able to accomplish, and your team, certainly the team, over this last year and a half. And it's got to be difficult. Many organizations are having to draw on the discretionary energy of their people. And hopefully that's been built up over time, because the risk of losing people, and now we're seeing organizations really struggling because they're coming back, but they don't have the people to support their product or the customer, and so on. So how has retention been an issue at all for your organization, for Piedmont?
Absolutely. And of course, it started on the front line. Many nurses left to take travelers' jobs. That was our biggest competition during the pandemic. And of course, we were bringing in nurses, contract nurses, or nurses that the state helped to provide, that were contract as well, you know. But that, you know, and of course they were paid just incredible rates to travel and, you know, and provide nursing services. And it was nothing we could compete with. The same issue with respiratory therapy. And as a result of that, you know, certainly our nursing turnover has increased. It has increased much more than it has been over the past few years. Our overall turnover has increased. I'm not going to say it has increased as dramatically, but one of the strategic imperatives for talent for fiscal year 22, which begins July 1st, is rebuilding our workforce. And within that is not only attracting, but retaining. And I mean, you know, it's much bigger than it ever was, because we're also losing people, not just as travelers, but this crosses all disciplines. People are tired. And I mean, some of the healthcare workers are saying, I don't want to do this anymore. Our retirements last year went up 113%.
Oh, wow.
You know, and it was people that were just eligible to retire. So it was just, and yes, most of it was in the clinical area. Now, some of those are coming back as what we call people. They'll work a few shifts here, a few shifts there, you know, but yeah, I mean, there was a variety of reasons. And then we are seeing more of a need within our workforce. And I think this goes without saying, with the, you know, for those of you that are in the audience, it goes without saying on employee mental health well-being. I mean, you got to think about what went on in the pandemic. People were sick. People were tired. You didn't know what was going on in their families. They could have lost a job. Then you have the social injustice issues that, were rampant and, throughout last summer and beyond. And people have many things now disturbing them. And it's a myriad of issues, not just one that you can focus in on.
Mhm. So you all were just right there in the middle of it all.
Oh, yeah.
And so I bet you that there were a lot of long, long days for you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm sure those of you on the call will admit that working at home, you work a heck of a lot longer because it's like you can't leave it at the end of the day. You don't have that reception to go to or something like that. So you just keep at it.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen fellow executives just really weary, and thank goodness. And I've seen more of it over the last few months. People are getting out, they're taking some time off, and which is so healthy.
Mm-hmm.
All
Yeah.
of us.
Yeah, the lines have certainly become blurred between
Yep.
life and work. And it's been, that again, another, I think, catalyst from the pandemic, but it's certainly been there pre-pandemic. It's just that it became much more severe.
Right. We've seen a rise at Piedmont in our behavioral issues amongst employees. And we do attribute a lot of that to whatever is behind, their stress. It could be anything from, an employee to employee dispute, to just, outright inappropriate behavior. So it varies across the spectrum, but we have seen a rise in that.
Yes, yes. And I think all across the country, there's been a rise in, obviously, we've seen
Yeah.
behavioral issues that have just been accentuated, exaggerated, and so on because of having to work from home or loss of job or schooling children from home.
Yep.
All of the above, all of the above. So what do you think prepared you for leading through this tremendous pace and scale of change?
Well, a lot of varied experiences like I described earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And not making snap decisions unless you had to because you had an hour to do it. I am very intuitive. So I attribute and make decisions based on facts and data, but a lot of it is intuitive and, what is the impact going to be on the organization? What is the impact going to be on people? So I am, a lot of it during the pandemic was my gut talking. I'll just, be very transparent there. And you have some good calls, you have some not so good calls. Fortunately, none of them were detrimental.
Yeah. What's the lesson there, Vicki? For those who may be listening in, how do you know when to listen to your gut? How do you know to pay attention to your intuition?
Like I said, now I am probably far more intuitive than a creature of habit just to depend on data. Mm-hmm. But the data tells a story. Mm-hmm. And of course, that's had to be more of a learned trait for me because I am so intuitive, but you can look at the data, you can look at, okay, here's where we are, here's where we've got to be, here's what's worked before. And here's what the impacts will be. So I would, as I would go through the thought process, it was more thinking, can I trust my gut? I've got to think about, how much is it going to cost? What the impact is? What type of disruption will it cause, et cetera. And I think, all of our leaders faced that from time to time, even those that are much more data centric than others that are more intuitive.
Yeah, always we talk a lot about decision making as a balance between speed and quality, and so sometimes it's necessary just to go with 60% data and 40% gut, because you gotta honor the speed necessary,
right?
Versus the quality. Well, maybe we need more information to make sure we have a high quality decision, which may cost us in speed.
Exactly.
So, yeah,
exactly.
It sounds like you're able to make faster decisions based on your gut and on your experience.
On the experience. And again, I rely on the data, because you can't make a good business case to take it forward. Unless you rely on the data as well. So, it has to be a marriage of the two.
Yeah, that makes sense. And also a factor of confidence. And boy, you really have a lot of confidence. You seem tremendously confident to me. So where do you think that confidence comes from?
I think it was embedded growing up. I was always a leader at school. Student council, leader of this, leader of that. But again, what I told you earlier, I also had my superpowers whispering in my ear. You can do anything you want to. It just takes hard work and go after it. I was taught the value of work. And frankly, people ask me, what was your favorite job? My favorite job was the 7 years I spent teaching swimming in my pool in West Monroe, Louisiana, because I built a swimming business, and over the years, but it was the value of starting something and then building it. So I attributed that a lot, to the values my grandfather instilled in me.
So that's where it was birthed. So if ever, and possibly this doesn't happen to you, but what do you say to yourself when your confidence is shaken, if ever?
It does. We're all human, and I had a feeling you were going to ask me that. I have to have my moments. There are people I talk to. As my children have become adults, they've been good sounding boards, as I am for them. And then I have a marvelous network of friends, personally, and then professionally. I'll go back to my mentor, and who is retired now, and especially if my confidence is shaken. I think I'm an extrovert, so I've got to talk about it. I can't just let it ball up inside of me. That drives me crazy. But it's having that support network, which I've been fortunate enough and blessed enough to have, the friends and the professional colleagues and my family.
Yeah.
Talk to.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like you hesitate to reach out to others when you have that perhaps self-doubt or should I kind of questions.
And that's the thing. If you have a mentor, or if you've got, just a very close colleague, friend, family member that really cares about you and trusts you, let go with your vulnerabilities.
Mhm.
If your confidence is shaken, you'll be resilient.
Mhm.
Having that person to go to, to talk through things, and make sure it's not an emotional dialogue totally, although when one's confidence is shaken, it can be partially emotional, but your resilience will come back more quickly, and your confidence level, if you allow yourself to have a rational and a logical thought process, and then talk about it. If your confidence has been shaken, say by something your boss has said to you, figure out how you can address it.
Mm.
Not confrontive, but figure out, say, hey, you know what? This kind of bothered me, and I want to hear it from your perspective, but I want you to hear it from mine.
Mm. Now, there's a theme in, it seems to me, in 100% of the guests from Women in Leadership for this year anyway, there's always a mention of a mentor. How did you find your mentor?
We found each other. He was one of my bosses at Cigna, like 30 plus years ago. And then he left. We followed each other, so to speak, meaning we stayed in contact with each other. And then it was interesting. As my career began to rise, he reached out to me. So the roles reversed.
Mm.
As he was kind of going into more the winter of his career, some things were happening, and he reached out to me. So we've had, I'd say, over the past few years, that type of relationship, mentee can become mentor.
Mm.
We were only together in the same company for, 4 years. I did some consulting work for him when I was in the Deloitte job. But that's what it is about a mentor. You don't have to be paired at work. There are plenty of mentoring initiatives, but mentoring has to reside in the culture of an organization. But a true mentoring relationship, you will follow you regardless of where you go, or regardless of where that mentor goes.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So for those listening, what would you advise them about finding a mentor? How should they even go about it if that's something they want to do?
The best place to start, obviously, is at work. And it does need to be someone you trust,
Mm-hmm.
you admire,
Mm-hmm.
you feel good about their business decisions. It shouldn't necessarily be in your line, although mine started that way. He was my boss at the time, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. Doesn't have to be in your discipline.
Mm.
My mentor just happened to be a more senior HR leader, but he had done multiple things and went on to run in operational roles. So it doesn't have to be. And also, if you are looking to, say, move out of your discipline and maybe move to another, it might be good to find someone in that particular discipline. But also the key to it is staying in touch, keeping the relationship open, honest, and continue to nurture it.
Mm.
Don't just let it drop when someone leaves the organization. That's what's important.
I think that is so critical. And as the mentee, taking the initiative to make sure that that relationship continues versus sitting back and waiting on the mentor. Mentors are very, very busy people too. So it's very important to keep that relationship alive as from the mentee to the mentor. I agree with that. That's fantastic.
You know, I got the nicest message on Facebook from a woman that I hired when I was at Cigna. Gosh, I guess it's been 30 years ago. And she said, I just need to say thank you to you. And she said, because you are the one that put the trust in moving me from operations into HR. And she said, has become my life's work. I mean, you know, it was one of those out of the blue things, but, and I wasn't a mentor necessarily for her, but you don't know who's watching, and you don't know sometimes what impact you have along the way. And I might mention, yeah, I mean, more than one mentor, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. You may have several journeys your own, and one mentor may be stronger than another in a certain discipline.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my husband, who's an executive, was saying the other day, which I think is so true, as leaders, when we have a conversation with someone, first of all, as you mentioned, we're always being watched. But
yes,
second of all, when we're having a conversation with somebody, that could be the most important conversation in that individual's professional life. And so it's important to be aware of that as a leader. As you know, as you've already mentioned, you're always being watched and listened to. And so I want to switch gears now and talk more about Piedmont's amazing growth. You've already talked about how there's a deal in place to buy 4 more hospitals in Georgia. You'd already added about 15,000 employees since 2013. I think that's about a 60% growth if I've done my math right. And so there are many, many, many implications to merging cultures. And we talked about retaining talented people through growth such as this one. Yet in 2019, you were named as Georgia's best employers by Forbes and the top healthcare system on the list. Remained a great place to work, certified over the years. So what do you think are the hallmarks of Piedmont's culture that have contributed and brought Piedmont to be considered a great place to work?
I think it was the cultures, but I'll also add, I think based on our surveys, believe it or not, the last survey we did, because we did postpone the big survey this year, it started March 2nd of last year. So you can imagine the world shut down when we were in the midst of our
Not a good time, not a good time.
But you know what, even in 20, the results were outstanding. But going back to what you asked me, goes to really our philosophy. And when we do affiliate with new entities, we respect that there is a culture there. We find out when we go, you know, on site, due diligence, et cetera, we find out, you know, where are the sacred cows? What are the, you know, what do people value in this culture? And then you go through the process. Of course, there are things when you are trying to achieve operating efficiency and, you know, in any way that, you know, are going to need to be the same. But then you work through some of the trade-offs, and you don't destroy the culture of an entity in other words, and I created my own word, you don't Piedmontize them, so to speak. It's, you understand that there is a culture there, and it will remain, although they're part of a bigger family now. One example I'll give you, when we affiliated with Columbus Regional back in 2018, they had already had experience with Great Places to Work, and we were just moving to Great Places. Their survey results were excellent, but their survey results right after integration, which normally you see results plummet, actually went up and I'm not going to say skyrocketed, but went up significantly in all areas, on engagement, on commitment, etc. And that was certainly very welcome data to receive, but at the same time, recognizing Columbus has its culture, and Piedmont did not come in there and just destroy the culture. They have become part of a family. We all have the same operational policies, the same HR policies, benefits, etc. And certainly there was change. But my philosophy as we're moving into these affiliations is communicate, and show people the full picture. The what's in it for me questions, like what are my benefits going to be? What's my pay going to be? What's my PTO going to be? Help everybody see what we call the whole pie. And, there will be pieces of that pie that will be a little different, but help them see the whole pie.
Very good. What kinds of things did you do to communicate?
Oh, goodness. Forums, town halls, sessions, virtual learning sessions now, sessions, learning systems, because we have a clinical system that the clinical people have to learn, as well as the business system for both employees and managers. So there were a series, and then of course tapping in to more leadership sessions as well. So just immersion, especially for leadership.
So what I heard you say was interesting. You don't go in and try to destroy the culture, but also you don't go in and ignore their culture either.
No, you don't ignore. Yeah, you don't ignore it, but I mean, again, after affiliation, they're carrying the Piedmont brand. Their Piedmont signage at the facility. So again, like I said, part of the family. Mm-hmm. At the same time, just recognizing and respecting that there are some nuances of culture there.
Mm-hmm. One of our listeners, Julie Zaide, welcome Julie, has said your philosophy reminds me of John Cotter's work around change. Yeah. So managing change using a variety of different kinds of interventions, communication, training, learning, certainly recognizing that what's in it for them, that kind of thing. So how are you keeping then this Piedmont culture alive?
Well, a lot of it has to do with branding. A lot of it has to do with communications. Our CEO, my leader, does communicate. He is especially visible with the new facilities, and he's very inclusive as far as top leadership throughout the system. Very, very inclusive in that regard. So I certainly want to applaud Kevin for that, and he's been certainly our guidepost on all of this.
Mhm.
But I attribute it to that, and then of course reinforcement of some of the changing elements. Also, one of the most important things that we, and I shouldn't have forgotten this, that we use in our change sessions is what we call our plan on a page. And it has our 4 anchors, which are strategic growth, talent, stewardship. But in the middle, which is why we exist, is quality, safety, and service, because we're there to serve the patient. And the other anchors revolve around quality, safety, and service. So we really embed that and the values of Piedmont. Also, we look for companies or our facilities that their cultures have similar values, as we are affiliating.
That's so important. That is so important. So what do you think are the lessons that have been learned through all of the different transitions, through the pandemic? Any key lessons that you can share with us?
Yes. One thing I will tell you, because early on, we didn't really have a methodologies and a process. And so as we have evolved with our affiliations, we have a playbook, and we have a playbook both we have a playbook for talent, we have a playbook for finance. It's really structured very methodically. The other thing is we do intense training for Piedmont professionals that are going to touch the new organization. There is training on the affiliates culture, what to expect, and also elements of change, like when communication takes place, say in a benefits session or something like that. You can't just get frustrated and say, well, I'm sorry, it's the Piedmont way, and this is the way Piedmont does it. It's learning to take that gracious step back and say, let me hear what you're trying to say, and let's talk about how we can get from where you are to where we would like to be, and look at the whole pie. But someone just asked about our 4 anchors. Our 4 anchors are talent, strategic growth, which you can see we're very active, stewardship. We are very, very aggressive stewards of within our organization, from an efficiency and a cost effectiveness, and also putting money back into facilities for our communities. I mean, look at the new tower in Atlanta at the corner of Collier and Peachtree. And all those 3 pillars wrap around, because they support why we are there. And that is quality, safety, and service. And our purpose is to make a positive difference in every life we touch.
That's very, very, I would think, attractive to people who want to be a part of something like that. And also the stewardship, it strikes me as, it's a nonprofit. Piedmont's a nonprofit. So that's a great word for being a steward of all that you've been given. And
oh yeah,
right.
To give it back. I mean,
right.
that's what you're expected to do. Not the shareholders, but we are stewards to the community.
Well, thank you for elaborating on that. Thank you, Nancy, for the question, because it really gives us greater insight into how Piedmont works and how it works so well. So thank you for that. So Vicki, what are you looking forward to?
Well, one thing I'm looking forward to is my husband and I getting back and doing some of our marvelous trips that we were able to do pre-pandemic. I've got 2 on hold, 100% paid for already, and just, trying to pin down some dates. And one of them is to Southeast Asia, and they still haven't opened up unless you want to be quarantined for 2 weeks. So my husband was in Vietnam, and he finally, about 3 years ago, said, it's been a long time. I've heard so much about it. I really want to go back. So we have a trip. We were supposed to go last March, but guess what happened? To Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos. So we're just hopeful we can get that scheduled early next year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's one of the main things. And then spending more time, more quality time with family. I mean, our kids do not live nearby. One is in the process of moving back to the Dallas-Fort Worth area from Denver. That's our son, Clayton. And Camille, our daughter, and her husband and Athena live in Austin, Texas. Not bad places to visit, but just getting to spend more time with them.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sorry, I think I mispronounced your daughter's name in the introduction. So
hey, you know what? That's what it looks like.
All right, Camille, I love that.
Yeah, Camille. Well, in fact, Siri doesn't let me say Camille when I'm doing a phone call.
Ah, all right. I don't feel so badly because Siri never gets anything wrong.
Oh no, that's right.
Well, so I've been remiss in asking our listeners to please put in any questions that you may have for Vicki. Please go ahead and put those in the Q&A or in the chat. There's a couple of questions in here, so we want to get your questions as well. So Kathy, what are you hearing from our listeners? What are their questions?
Okay. One of the first questions I got, which I think you've touched on, but I really like to hear this. Are you a risk taker? What has worked and may not have worked as you had planned?
Yes, I'm a risk taker. I am opportunistic, professionally. I have probably, my risk has probably gone down a bit as I have become more seasoned. That's just a nice thing of admitting that I'm old, but what has worked and what has not. Again, we talked about intuition. If you do not look at data and look at facts supporting a decision you're going to make, you've got to be prepared for the risks that may fall and that may happen. So I would really say that when you are taking a risk, whether it's a job change, whether it's a decision you're making within your organization, is really, really ground your decisions on, with a cross between your intuitive and your facts.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a great answer. We have another question from Susan Hitchcock, because she has 100% flexibility now. What haven't you done that you still want to pursue? Other than going to Vietnam.
Yeah. Okay. Well, at some point, and I haven't really thought about it seriously, retire. And what does that look like? I haven't, and like I said, I haven't, seriously thought about it, but I can't really tell you what that looks like. I know that I'm going to have to be busy when that time does come, and have that's where it will be a cross between Go-Go, that's my grandmother name, and serving the others or the community with some of the skills that I learned, during my career.
Great. All right, this is another good question. How do you keep your energy refueled?
Okay. I really don't know, but I'm just a very happy person, a very resilient person. I love where I am. I love life, and I mean, I can get energy just looking outside. Now, refueling, like just going to the office every day, I just try to look ahead, that there's light at the end of the tunnel, especially if you are in a very intense environment, whether it be a project, whether it be some type of scenario, is I try to look ahead. And one thing I learned along the way from my mentor, all these things shall pass.
That was my mother's favorite saying, this too shall pass. And I think about it all the time when really bad things happen. You just got to get through it. So very, very much wisdom. So another great question here, this from Susan Hitchcock. What specific leadership strengths do you think women have that are just specific to women?
I think the intuitive side is more prominent in women, because there's so much that our intuition tells us as and even if you're not a mother, it's the intuitive side, in my humble opinion, tells you more. So I think there's that. I think also, to a degree, women are more organized in some regards, and have very, very skilled organizational abilities and capabilities. I mean, think about it. If you are a working parent, it's juggling the at-home responsibilities, which, let's face it, for the majority, I know it was this way when I was rising, the majority of the household management, is traditionally on the woman. So by the ability to do that plus juggling work, I think it's the organizational skills and the multitasking skills that and also I think women have less tunnel vision to a degree. So I think those are some of the things that I see that are really the highest traits, qualities that women possess.
Okay.
Leadership and being just a strong leader. Now, what holds us down is sometimes the lack of confidence and thinking we can't. I mean, that's a whole nother series,
Ann Coelho does a really good webinar on women and confidence, because it is so true. There is such a difference.
Well, in our own research shows that we see ourselves as less competent. We rate ourselves lower in the competencies whenever assessed versus how others rate us.
Right.
And so typically others, I mean, the difference is significant. On average, not all women, but on average, women see themselves as less competent than others see them. So, which directly affects their confidence. Yeah. I see a question in our chat from Julie. Julie Zide. She asked, what values are most important to you at this time in your life?
Certainly the values of respect, integrity, and then overshadowing that, the value of family, the value of home. And I don't mean just a house. I mean a home.
Mm-hmm.
I think those are very, and the value of being real. If I could, offer any advice, is just be true to yourself and be real in who you are. There's no reason to put on a mask, even though we've worn those for a while, and not be who you really are. Is just be, always be true to yourself.
That's fantastic. I saw someone wearing a mask recently that had a picture of their actual mouth on the outside.
Oh, I love it.
It was actually a hotel worker, and apparently they did that for all their service team,
Wow.
so that they appeared to be who they really are.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that analogy, though. Kathy, go ahead. What else?
Okay, we have a couple more questions. One is, outside of the pandemic, what has been the most significant change in the healthcare industry? And then how has Piedmont handled that?
I think some changes have been, and of course it varies from administration to administration, and I go back, several administrations. It would be the changes in reimbursement, and mostly the Medicare reimbursement, because what it has done, it has really forced hospitals to be much more directed and focused on, certainly survival, on finances, etc. So I think, and that has evolved through the years, but I think that's been some of the most important things that have happened.
Okay.
Wow.
This is a question from Susan Hitchcock. I love it. It says, I have to ask, as a Southern woman, what, if any, biases have you experienced for being a Southern woman?
Yes, I was referred to, and it was more of a slur at a company one time, as Magnolia. And I also it was suggested to me, it wasn't my mentor that I've mentioned, that I may want to get some speech lessons. Y'all got to remember, this was like late 80s, early 90s. And it was also back in the days where women dressed up in suits that had a skirt and a blazer, almost looking like men, had a starched white button up the front blouse with a tie, So that was what it was like then. So I have been told that. I've also been asked sometimes in an interview, what does your husband do? So, and I will also tell you, I think one of the most excluded situations I ever had is when I was doing a turnaround in New Orleans, and there was an offsite, and the leader of the organization said, well, and I was the first person that had ever been in the C-suite that was a woman. So understand that. Well, you can't go. And I said, what do you mean I can't go? Well, they don't allow women at this place. And I said, you know what? I said, you better find another place. And I said, you've got an entire team. And I said, if that's the rules at that place, we need to go somewhere else, whether it's me or in the future, someone else. We did go somewhere else, but those are some examples. Some of them were women, some of it was Southern.
Okay.
Yeah.
Vicki, that makes you a trailblazer.
So,
So Kathy, I see another question from
Yeah, go ahead.
Nancy. You want me to? So Nancy Cranford has asked, with your experience, Vicki, what advice or tips would you give a newer female leader who has the opportunity to now put together and lead a new department at their company when they've never done it before?
Clearly communicate, have your plan, clearly communicate your goals, seek advice. Especially if it's a new opportunity, seek advice. Also, like I said, and I'll go back to be true to yourself and let yourself be a bit vulnerable and say, understanding that no question would be a bad question. Seek advice either from colleagues outside the company that may be doing the same thing or internally so they can give you a hint and be very, very clear about your goals. And then as far as your team, get to know them. I think that's what's so important. Certainly not a personal relationship, but the more you get to know your people, there becomes a mutual respect. You know what's going on and what makes them tick. And then, they can certainly understand you. So hopefully that was a few tips.
No, that's really good.
Very helpful.
There is a question from that pertains to something we talked about earlier when we were first getting on the call, and that was when you were changing schools. Would you tell us that story? Because I think it's very appropriate for this group to hear it.
Okay. I had always wanted to go to a large university. And I started out at the university that I actually ultimately finished at the University of Louisiana at Monroe. And then I wanted to go, like I said, to a larger school. So I transferred to LSU. That was my dream. I mean, there was nothing like being in Tiger Stadium on a Saturday night, and I loved it, did well there. Well, after about a year, I had a boyfriend. He didn't become my husband, but guess what? He was back in Monroe. And so I followed him back. So I must say, yes, I followed a boy, and it did really change the outcome of where I wanted to finish. But it's history now. If I could rewrite it, yes.
So just one do-over in your life. That's pretty.
Well, no, there's a lot. There's a lot of do-overs.
Okay, name one. We'd love to hear about a good failure. We all like to hear good failure stories.
Oh no. I mean, there have been some situations, at work, and I'm thinking way back that just did not pan out. It wasn't a well thought out plan. It did not get accolades. So not everything along Vicki's path has been rosy. And another failure, and a lot of it was more beating myself up. I would come to your children and your child rearing. Am I giving them enough time? It's, because I'm balancing career and I'm raising them. But I obviously had Larry, my life partner, along with it. But I would say, if the kids had a bad grade, I would think that it was my failure too. I mean, I didn't do the homework for them, but I felt like, okay, what am I not doing as a parent? Or get the phone call from the principal on something they've done, so
Mm.
those are things that, and it was embarrassment also.
Mhm. Yeah, it's from those experiences that we women, I believe, learn resilience. And
Yep.
because you can't go back, you can't do anything over. All you can do is learn and grow and move forward. Right?
Yeah, and you say things, and being an extrovert, some of us will say things just because we're talking out loud, and we don't mean to, but sometimes what you say, and sometimes as a very confident woman, and I have been told this and have learned to curb it, I have been, sometimes my approach can be intimidating.
Mm.
I don't mean for it to be, but it can be. And obviously you think you're a failure there. Oh my gosh, the last thing I want to be is intimidating. I want to be a strong leader and guide, but I don't want to be intimidating.
I can't imagine anyone thinking that.
No, it has happened. And my children have told me that.
Mm.
You can be intimidating,
Well, sometimes it's the position, right, that you hold that's part of that intimidation. But anyway, so Kathy, we need to bring this part of the discussion to a close, but I want to encourage our participants to hang in there because we've got one last question for Vicki. So Kathy, bring us up to date on what's happening at TurkNet.
Okie doke. Wait, sorry, hold on just 1 second.
I may have caught you off guard. I apologize.
Oh yeah, something did get cut off. I'm coming back though, y'all. Here we go. Well, one thing I'm going to tell you about, just as we're pulling it up, that we have this amazingly fabulous podcast series that's just gotten started. And I'm going to be sending you right after this is over, sending you do you see it now?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yes, I'm still seeing the outside. I'm still not.
Okay, we're going to send you a really good preview that is a little clip of it, and I really want you to click on it and watch it. It goes about a minute, but Virginia Means is the speaker. Okay. Having a few technical difficulties, sorry. Virginia Means and Anne did a great interview. Virginia, if you know her, is the Chief People Officer at United Distributors, and there's so much wisdom in this. It's going to be published probably just next week, early next week, but I want you to click when I send you that link right after this. You will just love it. We've done 2 podcasts. Anne has done just a tremendous job. These speakers, well, I mean, look at the quality of the speaker we just had. Vicki, oh my goodness. We just are so blessed with amazing speakers. Our next speaker she's very exciting. Also, Jane Garvey. She's the first female FAA administrator. She is going to talk about from teacher to transportation executive, and we're all looking forward to that. That'll be June 25th, and we'll be sending you a link to get registered for that. And have y'all noticed how many times we've talked about resilience today? It's come up again and again and again. So we have a program that we'll be launching about resilience, but we have a free open house on Thursday, June 17th at 2 p.m. and I'll send you the link for that. And our own Vicki Alberson is a senior consultant in healthcare, is going to lead this. She's an excellent speaker, and you'll really, really enjoy this. But just as Vicki has said, there's a lot of change right now in healthcare, and a lot of it is just that our employees are just worn out and having all kinds of stress issues. And this resilience is a really great thing. And this is a plug for Tina, our CEO, Tina Mantella, is going to be facilitating this wonderful building diversity, equity, and inclusion into your technology and your business. I'll send you that link also. It's for Tech Alpharetta. If you don't know the group, they're amazing. They really, really have great speakers, as you can see by this lineup. And Tina will be moderating that. And then we want to encourage you to get social with us. Please join us on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on Twitter. We have a YouTube channel now. We have an amazing communications director now, Jonathan, or as we call him, JP. And he is doing such a good job getting us out there. And then contact information, and I'll send you this too, just in case you need us to partner with you on anything. Please contact us, and we would love to jump on a call with you. And Anne, I'm going to send it back to you.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you for the great plug on our new podcast series.
It's so good.
We've had several fantastic interviews take place there. All right, so Vicki, you ready?
Yeah, and let me say something before we do that. Virginia Means and I are very close professional colleagues, so I would encourage all of you to participate in that podcast. She is an extremely strong leader and also has a story. I also am familiar with Alana, who's going to be on the podcast. I think it's a podcast that your CEO is going to be leading.
Oh, good. Thank
Anyway,
you.
and have a tremendous amount of respect for her as well. But I know Virginia very well and just have a tremendous amount of respect. So anyway, sorry, I had to.
Well, no, thank you for that. She does
Yes.
have a tremendous story to tell, and she
Yeah.
tells it beautifully in the podcast. So thank you for that.
Mhm.
So what is the one thing that you want to leave with the audience today? Something that you want them to really take away?
Hopefully over the last hour plus, as I've told my story and ups and downs along the way and tips, hopefully, there has been just some general wisdom that you have gleaned, from what I've said. But I think if I leave anything, and you heard me say it a little earlier, is always be true to yourself. And, it will help you in your work. It will help you in your confidence level, will help you at home. But just be true to who you are and be who you are. In my case, I'll just be a magnolia.
Thank you, Vicki. And thank you to all of our listeners. We'll hopefully see you on this seminar series next month. But thanks again, Vicki. Great work.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Take care.